an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Grey's Sister, chapters 46, 47, and Epilogue. In these chapters, well, we finished this installment of the story, but I didn't get anything like the satisfaction of another Tacsis dying. And I'm really sad about it. I just wanted some fucking heads to roll, man. And I didn't get it. And I don't know what to do with myself now. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Martin for commissioning this episode. Martin's in the chat. Hi, Martin. This ending was really unexpected in how little it actually tied up. Now, I'm not saying that I disliked the ending, because it's not something. Not being satisfying and not liking it aren't exactly the same. Sometimes you can be unsatisfied because you liked so much of it, such a great deal, that it, like, the fact that you didn't get a certain thing makes it worse somehow because you did like the other part. For me, I am satisfied in one way because I'm putting a lot of faith in the author here. But I'm unsatisfied in the short term because I wanted at least one of the two remaining Tacsis shitheads to get, if not a straight up death, at least a humiliation of some kind. Like, so Raymond Tacsis is the one that Nona killed, right? And then Lano Tacsis is his brother, and Thurin Tacsis is his father. Is that right? I can't believe I got that right. Thank you, Martin. Wow. I really I don't know how I remembered Thurin. But I wanted Lano or Thurin to be dead by the end of this book. Didn't need to be both. I knew that was asking too much. But I thought, even if they didn't die, that maybe we would get some capture, or the death of one more would motivate the other even more, because maybe Nona would be responsible, or would look to be responsible. It was as close to responsible as they needed for their purposes, really. And I know that I should be keeping myself focused on the bigger picture, but the idea of Zole committing treason and making this deal that she was planning on making with, who was it, the Ice Tribers? That I have much less connection to, naturally, than I do to Nona's personal plight and these guys getting their hands on her. The thing with Zole is perfectly serviceable in terms of an overall, concern, a major issue for the next book. Although, I say that, I'm not even sure that it will be a major concern, because now that she's been sort of outed, it sounds like she may just lose any sort of momentum that she's picked up so far. But really, the thing I care about is Nona, and these guys continually coming after Nona. Now, I appreciate that the epilogue deals with them coming to get her, and that we get another pass at the plot point that I'm the most interested in personally. So I feel like that's a tacit acknowledgement by the author that maybe the other thing didn't quite feel done to us. But it doesn't do the job of making this feel like the end of a story and a complete story on its own, which is one of those things that just happens when you do a trilogy and there's a second one. It almost always has to end on an unresolved bit of a downer note in order for the third book or movie sometimes to begin the way that it needs to. So I think I maybe should have seen this coming, is what I'm saying. But I truly am not totally sure that I understand the overall arc that this author is going for. I thought that it was going to be very focused on like the chosen one uniting the world or whatever. And that doesn't seem to be it at all. I mean, Zole is like, she turns up at the end here holding a ship heart, and she seems to be like sort of okay. I get the impression, and I might have misread this, but I got the impression that Nona saw evidence on her skin of her being inhabited by a devil that others somehow missed. So Zole is trying to pretend that she's fine, and Nona knows that she's not fine. But the fact that Zole, like, this author doesn't really commit to Zole being the chosen one in a way that I would expect, which in part I enjoy, because there is so much about the chosen one sort of like trope that can serve as a deus ex machina to get a character to be able to do whatever you want them to be able to do in that moment, right? So you are basically setting things up to be impossible. And then all you have to say is, oh, except that they can do it when no one else can because they're the chosen one. And the fact that it looks like maybe, and again, I'm hoping I understood this right, but the fact that it looks like Zole has suffered some sort of consequence for holding the ship heart is, to me, the author kind of like nudging us a little bit and being like, having her say, I'm the chosen one, is lampshading it, you know? Like, you thought that she could do this thing. Everybody sort of thinks that she can do this thing, and it's not like that. But they're so willing to accept it because that lines up with what they would like conveniently at the moment to be true. And I'm hoping that I read that right. We'll get that. I'll go through the actual text. But I wanted to mention that here. So then we have this, in chapter 46, this is very like action based. When we ended the last section, Nona was basically like spent. And she was saying that she was going to tap into the way, again, the path. And you're not supposed to do that twice within, what is it supposed to be? Like a month of each other? Or a week of each other? She is basically really taking her life in her hands doing this. This is something that you're meant to recover a significant period of time before attempting to do it again. Martin says 2 days, I think, or something like that. Oh, that's much less than I thought. But nevertheless, you know, we hear that story about one of the nuns who tried leaving like a nun-shaped imprint, like a fucking Looney Tune on the roof of a, like, she basically, there's a crater where she was because she attempted to do this again too soon. Didn't go well for her. So she tries to say that she's restored from standing before the ship heart to Ara. She's lying. She's trying to get Ara to just sit down and shut up and let me do my thing. And when she tries to get in touch with the path again, it's like, it's not like it's hard to get there. It's just that it's slipperier. It seems like it's harder to hold on to. This like for a second. And then all of a sudden it's this like river. And it feels like the ship heart is sort of connected to it in this moment for her that makes it more solid. Like, I think it's a combo maybe of her having reached for the path earlier and the ship heart being here that makes it feel so much more three-dimensional to her than it ever has. And she remembers how Darla had absolutely hated the blade path, but she constantly went and tried it again without any sort of fear, evidently. And she asks Darla why, and Darla says, "My father told me your weaknesses have more to teach you than your strengths." Which I swear to God, I wish somebody had said to me as a kid. I feel like a lot of my self-worth would be tied up in different places if I viewed being bad at something as a learning experience and opportunity instead of a reason to quit, which is definitely how it was for me. And it just, that moment again made me regret the loss of Darla so badly. I won't get back into that whole thing again. I said what I said. I'm not totally sure if I was right or not on my assessment of the author killing her, but I feel very strongly about it still. And moments like this, it's tough because, like, I don't know what the author has in store. I don't know if there's like a reason that certain people have to survive and others don't. And I don't, you know, I don't really, I don't know a lot. But part of me really is just like, why Darla though? Come on. So I'm not going to get back into that again. I know that partially, what's the point of killing a character that you don't like as much? It doesn't hurt as much, right? But if that's all it is, if it's just trying to go for maximum pain, that can feel a little cheap in itself. I don't know. I don't have any answers. 7 moons to be safe, Nona says. I think that maybe when Martin says 2 days, I think that might be like what they say is the absolute minimum. And then like 7 moons to be safe. Like really 2, we can think you might be okay. But 7, if you really want to be sure you're okay. And we also get this moment with Nona where she says, General Rathen wouldn't know his daughter was dead. Not yet. He wouldn't know that Nona had used the last of the flesh bind that might have saved her. He wouldn't know that it had been spent on hollow revenge against a man not fit to even look at his daughter. I didn't think of that last week. And the idea that Nona is going to carry that, I hate it. It's a very Spider-Man sort of moment where, you know, he's like confronted by this criminal and given the chance to like fuck over the guy who just fucked him over or do the right thing and stop the dude. And he lets him go. And then that person goes on and kills Uncle Ben, right? Spoilers, by the way, for Spider-Man. And it feels like that. She lets herself get carried off by a desire of sheer wrath. She could have killed him, outright killed him. And she doesn't do that because she wants revenge specifically, not just to not be followed anymore. Now, she has this sort of idea in her head that when she puts this on him, eventually he will die of it. But that's, in my opinion, a real outside chance. It feels to me like you don't leave the guy. Like, I liked it in its way because I can be very wrathful, for sure. But I didn't love just leaving the guy and like thinking, well, eventually he'll die. You don't do that, right? It's a very James Bond sort of thing. nevertheless, I wasn't really like that mad about it. Mostly because it just, even if he didn't die, I would feel like he would maybe be permanently weakened, which would also be interesting. But the idea that maybe this stuff could have saved Darla, and she poured it all over this man to just stick the harm on him, and she could have saved her friend with it instead, that is cold-blooded. I hate it. Like, that is just... There's something about the two things being utterly disconnected, too, other than the fact that the same substance would have been necessary for both. There's something about... Darla's death doesn't... Like, she isn't injured as a result of what Nona does. It's simply that Nona could have saved her and can't because of this. There is something about that I think really is a beautiful snapshot of how the consequences of things in life are so unpredictable and apparently random that you just can't. We like there to be a certain symmetry to things. And this isn't symmetrical. It's simply like, there's like this cruel irony to it. And we know how much Nona cares about her friends. I mean, their friends are her family, which makes the speech the abbess gives later so much more beautiful and touching and makes me just weep a little bit. But we know what her friends mean to her. And for one of them to have died as a result of something that she did, indirectly though it may be, I don't see Nona getting over that one. I don't think that is... I feel like the rest of her life, this moment is going to be what she returns to every time she begins to want to do something for the sheer cruelty of it. This is what she's going to remember is Darla and just be like, no, I'm not doing that. And I can't help but wonder, considering that Darla said, you know, my dad said your weaknesses teach you the most. I wonder if she will internalize that as well. Her weakness is being bloodthirsty to a point that's like, that's what let that devil in, right? And man, I wonder about that with me sometimes. I can be a cruel person and not even realize it until years later. I'll think back on something I said and be like, open mouth, just like, bitch, what is wrong with you? And I can be vengeful in a way that isn't productive or helpful, and ultimately probably damaging more to me than anybody else. But I just have a hard time, because it feels so right in the moment, with that being seen as like a defect when it often just feels like justice, you know? And I think that's what I meant when I said what went down with Nona, as much as I was like, well, but he's still alive and you can't rely on this thing killing him. It felt like justice. This guy was torturing her and looking forward to continuing to torture her for a long time before killing her. And I can only imagine what he was going to do to her. And so, doing something wrathful in response, I'm not mad about it. That feels right to me. And so, I have a hard time holding it against her, maybe the way that I should, you know? And then this is when it says 7 moons to be safe. Nona hadn't any interest in being safe. If the path tore her apart, she would welcome it and hope only that no stone of Scherzel's palace was left atop another. She would turn her helpless rage to a fire that would purge the mountain, a fire that would consume the pallid flames behind her, scouring the tunnels of the Tetragode. So, this is when she runs down the path, and it does not feel difficult, and it doesn't feel like she has to search, and it doesn't feel like a disconnected thing. This is something that is leading her. It says the hard part wasn't staying the course, it was turning from it. Too many steps taken and leaving would cease to be an option, at least leaving and remaining whole. That was true of many paths, perhaps. Nona saw Clara's dilemma now, how hard it must have been for her to do what had seemed so simple from Nona's side, how easy it would be to return to her course. We'll talk about that. This is really something that I try and keep in mind every day. And it's something I'll refer to the Dresden Files because I feel like this is a really good description of it. There is a point at which Harry is talking to an angel, and the angel is talking about things that are likely to happen. And Harry's like, but human beings are supposed to have free will. How can you know what's going to happen? If people have free will, shouldn't you be unable to predict what they're going to do if they can choose to do anything? And the angel says essentially, oh, you do have free will and you can change your course. Absolutely. The thing is that people get into patterns and it's like a water running over the same piece of ground in the same direction over and over. It wears a furrow into the ground and gradually it becomes almost impossible for the water to take any other course. And you have to actively divert that water, stop up where it's going, and create a new path for it by digging. And that's a lot of work. And the vast majority of human beings don't succeed in doing that. They don't put in the work that they need to truly change their courses. So it becomes fairly easy to predict where somebody's going to wind up based on their past decisions, because most people want to change but don't want to undergo the daily, repetitive, boring labor of actually changing. And that is basically what Nona's talking about here, and how Clara helping her probably cost her a great deal to break out of this direction that she was already headed. And she sees how difficult it would be for Clara to not return to her course. And this is one of those things where I wonder if that will make Nona more sympathetic to Clara doing what she does, because she's going to realize just how difficult it is to move off the course that you're on. Now, I say that under the assumption that Clara is being genuine when she's talking to that Tacsis at the end. Which Tacsis is it that she's talking to? Lano Tacsis. He isn't, it's Thuron that she put the harm on, right? So I'm assuming maybe Lano doesn't even know about the harm yet, because I don't think he's been home. There's no mention of that, if I'm not mistaken. So I am assuming he doesn't know yet, because I think if he did, that shit would have come up. But anyway, okay. So I can't help but wonder if Clara isn't doing her own thing. If it might look like she's betraying Nona because she's got a larger game in her head. Now, that's me giving her a lot of credit, obviously. because I don't want to believe that what happened could have happened, and that she would then turn around and go right back to helping a guy who wants to torture her friend. It's not just kill her, which would be bad enough. She knows what he wants with Nona, and she's offering to help. And I just can't quite let myself believe that she would be willing to do that. Maybe that makes me a child. I'm willing to acknowledge that. So I'm a child. It's fine. But I want to think that there is more to this. The only thing I was going to say, the fact that she bails from their party before anybody notices, I was going to say, might count against the fact that this was all like part of a plot. Except that that's not necessarily true, because she would probably expect Nona to try and stop her. And so she would go without telling Nona, because she doesn't want to deal with Nona attempting to put a stop to the whole thing. I don't know, kids. I have so many questions here. But anyway, I'm hoping that this means that Nona, because I would love to see this be a story about somebody who is attempting to trust a friend that might not deserve it. As a friend who has not always deserved second chances, but is endlessly grateful for having gotten them, there is a certain beauty to that sort of story, even though it's really frustrating to read at times, because you don't want them to put themselves in danger again. You know, our main characters, we care about them. We don't want them to be in harm's way. But it's really tough to read it and feel like they might be absolutely getting stabbed in the back yet again and not blame them for it, you know? So I don't know. I don't even know. Because all I keep thinking of is in Les Mis, when Jean Valjean steals the silverware and runs off. And then he gets collared and brought back to the priest's house. And the priest is like, "Oh, no, I did give that to him. And you forgot the candlesticks. Remember I told you?" It's one of those beautiful, moments of perfect mercy. And I want that. I feel like if anybody could be capable of that, it would be Nona, because she just loves her friend so much. But I'm afraid for her, you know? And Clara is such a weird character. She's so well drawn, because you absolutely understand the world she's living in and what could have motivated her to do what she did. And yet you find her despicable, but there is a certain practicality that you get, because she was somebody who had no options otherwise, you know, she was going to probably just wind up staying at this school, and her father was going to stay in prison, maybe die there, you know. And yet she does betray Nona, but does it in a way that makes it feel like she's already in the middle of having second thoughts, and then comes back to help her in her direst moment of need so far. So then that gets her a lot of points from me. I go back and forth wildly, you know. I really enjoy her as a character, though. So I will say, as much as I was mad that I didn't get the end of a Tacsis, an official end, I really appreciate this book ending on the note it does, because it isn't just devastating. It's bringing up some question marks, and it could be devastating, but it also makes me examine the kind of person I am. Will I defend her? Will I expect the worst of her? What's my reaction to this going to be? You know? So I'm going to read this part. Nona ran the path, and all her hurts were left behind her in the very first step. Her wounds, her exhaustion, even the ache of Darla's death. Oh, sorry guys, I expanded the window and I lost my spot. Even the ache of Darla's death, something small behind her, growing pale and faint. Each step flooded her with an energy so fierce, so exhilarating, that it overwrote her, became her, replaced her center. In the end, only Darla brought her back. Nona would have run the path forever. Something so right couldn't be denied, but for the fact of her friend's death diminishing behind her. Something like that couldn't simply be thrown away, discarded, abandoned, as if it held no worth or meaning. And with a howl, Nona turned in a place where there could be no turning, and fell back. Fell back into the world. Again, that Darla, brings her back. You guys. I love it. She hit the ground, and only with an effort managed to stop falling. The world held too many possibilities, and her body wanted to explore them, wanted to flow like smoke, dance like the flames licking around her, follow gravity's pull deep into the ground, wanted to run as she had run on the path, not in one direction, but in all of them at once. Aspects of Nona began to separate, some to answer the horse's distress, some to explore the smoke, others to play with fire. Wild! I love this idea that she's basically separate, she has ascended for a moment, you know? A faint noise penetrated the vastness of Nona's wonder, and she turned toward the black carriage wrapped in smoke. A figure clung to its side. Aura. And Nona comes to the carriage, and she's holding on to this power. She moves behind the carriage, and she begins to push it all by herself. And I really appreciate that it's addressed. Sister Pan had explained that, let's see, I started a little late on there. Let's see. She turned the power inward, running it through muscle and bone, owning it as strength, not just the kind that moves mountains, but the kind that preserves the flesh doing the moving. Sister Pan had explained that one in length. The strength to punch through walls is of little use if the arm you punch with shatters before the rock does. Nona moved behind the carriage. She inched her hands forward with caution. Too much pressure too swiftly, and her palms would break through the timber before her, and she would be elbow deep in splintered wood. Hands met lacquered paneling, pressure mounted, and Nona's bare feet began to slide across the flagstones. Armored in the path's energies, Nona kicked at the stones beneath her feet, pulverizing the rock, excavating small craters to push against. The boards beneath her palms creaked, and the huge carriage stole into motion. So yeah, she basically, because remember how many people are in there? This isn't like moving a car. This is like moving a small bus. This is filled with a half a dozen people. More, actually. And so it busts into the stable doors and heads out into the courtyard. And the archers are not sure whether or not they should fire on it because this is Scherzel's carriage, but probably it's not good. And she is still behind it, shoving it forward. And they begin to zero in on her personally because they can see her pushing it. And basically, she takes advantage of that on purpose. She's like, okay, I'm going to get them to direct all of their fire at me so that it won't go through the sides of the carriage and injure people. And their fucking arrows do nothing to her. It's like she's made of stone. They just bounce right the fuck off her. They do no damage of any kind at all. And it says that she threw herself at the palace gates. Her final leap took her 6 feet off the ground, and her shoulder hit the heavy timbers with a bone-jarring impact. The doors stopped her dead, and she slid into a heap at their base. which honestly, I couldn't help but laughing. Like the mental image of her just like, she's pushing the half a bus. She's like getting arrows fired at her bouncing off. And she is so confident as she's coming at these doors. And then she just hits it and like slides down. Like, oh, that's so undignified. Poor Nona. So she taps into the memory of the classes again. I'm really delighted to find out that these classes are paying off and that she's actually learned something. That's nice. So this is academia. Inertia keeps even the lightest of things stationary in the face of great forces. You just have to act fast enough. So she begins to punch at the gate. Her fist burst through the timbers. She stood with her arm elbow deep in a splintered hole, her fist just emerging into the wind that scoured the outer surface. She slammed herself forward until her shoulders met the timbers and her elbow cleared the far side of the door. She bent her arm and clung on. More arrows hit her back and fell away, leaving just shallow wounds. So that's your signal. This shit is beginning to wear off. It's not just bouncing like nothing the way that it did before. Anchored by the thickness of the gates themselves, Nona set her other hand, palm out, to the other gate and pushed. When she punched, the door had no time to move, and so she punched through. Now she pushed with slow, inexorable force. Anchored to the left-hand gate, she couldn't move back. Instead, the gate had to take all the pressure. She circled around, setting her shoulder and hip to the other gate, using all the core strength of her body magnified 1,000 times by the fading energies taken from the path. And finally, it gives way, just as the carriage, from her momentum, comes up to the gates and smashes into them, and they open. And it says Nona found herself on the ground with something huge rushing above her. So then we jump into chapter 47. And Ara has been on the top of the carriage because she is a bitch who gets things done. And she finds the braking levers, which I guess would be pretty important, right? The slope was too steep for the brakes to fully arrest the carriage's motion, but they helped to tame it. Steering proved to be a different matter. The carriage steered itself by scraping along the rocky wall where engineers had cut into the valley's side to make the road. I gotta be honest here, it's not said, but the fact that it says, like earlier we hear about how this place is sort of like on a cliff in a storm, all I could think was that there's nothing but this wall between the carriage and like a cliff drop off. And that's what's like, that's it, you know, that's what I kept picturing here. Eventually, with about 2/3 of the mile-long journey to the pass road complete, the ruins of Scherzel's grand carriage lurched sideways and came to a halt, with the front right wheel hanging over an unknown drop. You know, I'm just saying. So everybody gets off. There are a couple of people in there who were killed. Yeah, there's because I said something like there's like 6 people, but yeah, a matronly woman in a voluminous dress had been shot through the shoulder, the arrow still in its place. Regal, Kettle, and Ara kept close around the abbess. I feel like that's like 8, right? Am I miscounting there? Anyway, so Nona survives this, and you can see that Ara wasn't entirely sure. And she asks where Clara is. That's her first question. And Ara says she never got in. And Kettle's like, I called to her. I let her know. And she went back into the smoke. She made a choice, Nona. She helped you when you needed help, but she fancied her chances better with the Emperor's sister. And, you know, it's one thing. This is like such a tough thing. When she said she fancied her chances, I had to remind myself that it's easy to just take that as like a statement of greed in general, of being like, she thought she could get more out of the Emperor's sister than she could get out of us. But I had to remind myself that, like, she was being asked to get in a carriage in the middle of a courtyard that was going up in flames and surrounded by walls, a locked gate, and archers. And she just didn't think that she was going to make it out the other side of that. And honestly, I get it. I'm not even that mad at her over that. Like, the bummer of it is that if she is purposefully betraying Nona again, it feels like she didn't think that they had a chance of escape. She did what she thought was going to save her own life, because I don't think she saw herself bringing anything to this escape. It's not like she was carrying the keys to the front gates, right? Like, maybe she could have helped, but honestly, I don't really see it. So by abandoning them, she's not ruining their chances. She's just doing what she thinks is best for herself and keeping herself alive. So I can deal with that decision right there. However, if it turns out that in making that choice, she felt the only option left to her was to rejoin with Zole for real, that's a huge bummer. I want her to believe that her friends could forgive her and understand and be like, I wasn't going out with y'all in that carriage because that looked like a death trap. But once I am out of here, I will go back to the Abbey and try and make good that way. And I think that Clara has the sort of like interpretation of how she thinks it would go down if she were to try and like go back after disappearing. And because she is somebody who tends to be, I don't even want to say cruel, because it's not. Cruelty for me is enjoying the pain for the sake of it. With Clara, the pain is a side effect of her doing what she needs to do to get what she wants. That's not the point of it. It simply happens as a result of her getting the thing. So I think somebody as cynical, I think that as a cynical person, Clara just doesn't think that her friends will forgive her again. She doesn't think the abbess will either. Nona is saying it makes no sense the abbess would have taken her back. And honestly, as much as I want to believe that, I'm not certain she's correct about that. I feel like the way that the abbess says she made a choice, I think maybe Nona's right, but she doesn't say that. And I really wonder how she would have handled that, because you can't just pull Clara back into the ranks and have her start attending classes with everybody again as if nothing happened. So what do you do in a situation like that? And especially like Nona's the one that she betrayed, right? Like ultimately it was Nona that was going to get gripped up and carried off. But Nona has some fierce friends now. And I can't imagine them treating Clara particularly well, even if Nona has forgiven her. Like, how much is that really worth? You know, I don't know how much weight that would carry. I guess if Nona decided to constantly stick up for her or keep an eye out for her because she knows that her friends are going to be like kind of hard on her. I don't know. All I'm saying is I think maybe Nona's right about the abbess being willing to take her back. I just don't know how that would pan out practically, you know? Martin says, technically it was Ara she betrayed. Clara just got tricked into thinking the Tacsis wanted Ara instead of Nona. I forgot about that. Oh, I forgot. You're right. Huh. So then it might be that Ara decides not to forgive her. Like Nona's the one that forgives her because she didn't know any better. And Ara's like, yeah, but she fucking knew about me and yet thought that was fine. I forgot about that. It's because that's also part of the whole thing with her, like being kind of embittered at the fact that Ara is privileged, right? She comes from money. She's got everything she needs. And that, I think, is part of the story that she tells herself, that Clara tells herself, regarding why, like, betraying Ara isn't really so bad, because she already has so much that who cares? Thank you for reminding me of that, Martin. I completely forgot that that's how it was played to her and that she didn't realize. I think the reason that I forget is because part of me just doesn't like believe that she didn't see that was what the whole plan was. And I really, I don't think that she saw, I don't think that she really realized, but there was a part of me that was just like, how could you have not figured this out? Like, come on. I just really felt so impatient, I think, that I kind of was like, you knew, shut up. And I don't think she really did, but I just got mad. So at this point, Regal shows up and he is just like, hey, what's up, girl? So anytime that I have dinner somewhere that you're also at, I get attacked by the same woman. And Kettle is like, Saphira? And I'm like, Kettle, settle down. Stop making this about you and your ex, even though it kind of is. And Regal says, I punched her pretty hard, but she'll get up again. And at this point, I hated how quick this happened, because I should have, they're not that far from the castle. It says that they only got like a half mile, right? But I just didn't think that they would be caught up with quite so quick. Scherzel will send her soldiers after us. How soon depends on how bad a fire we left her in. As if to answer her, the sky cleared further, and beneath the starlight the whole curve of the road could be seen, leading back to the broken gates of the palace. A troop of perhaps 50 soldiers was advancing along at speed. They'd covered half the distance already. And I was just like, what? Come on, shit. So they come and stand together, everybody. Basically, just like they're going to make a stand. It's their last moments. They don't have any ideas of winning. It's just basically, I think they've all sort of decided that they are not going to be shot in the back as they're running away. And Regal is standing with them, and he says something to Nona. Will you hold the road with me, sister? I've wanted to see you fight again. And she corrects him and says, I'm not a sister, just a novice. And he says, you're my sister of the cage. And she thinks, because she picked the name Sister Cage, that he like knows somehow. She thinks that he like found out and is a little freaked, because that was something only Ara is supposed to know, and Mistress Path. And then he goes on and says, we were both born from Giljon's cage after all. And she realizes, oh God, Jesus, he didn't mean that at all. But it's a moment to me of like the fact that he said that indicates to me a certain likeness of thought between the two of them that I think is a nice little like hint towards them being a good couple, potentially. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm just too much of a romantic. I've never been accused of that, but so this is when Abbess Glass comes over, and this is the speech that I was just like, oh my God. She too was smiling, albeit a smile tinged with sadness. You three have done astonishing things to bring us so close to an impossible success. Astonishing. But the world is not changed by individual acts of violence, no matter how good the cause. Neither can it truly be changed by the power of the path. The greatest of the Mystic Sisters all knew this. However much strength is concentrated in a single martial sister, however far the reach of a sister of discretion, it is overreached by the strength and reach of the masses. You may be rocks, But humanity is the tide, and you only have to stand upon the sand to see how that contest concludes. In the end, it is not whether we live or die here, but how the message echoes through the empire and beyond. We are not leaders, merely servants. Even the emperor's power is an illusion. Ultimately, the will of the people drives us as inevitably as the advance of the ice. And the people are, each and every one of them, the children of the ancestor, holy, chosen. We have shown them in Scherzel's true heart, and they will judge her actions. Those who cannot slow the pursuit must flee. They must scatter across the slopes, and we must trust that some will find their way to safety and speak of what has happened here. I've always prided myself on being able to look ahead, on being able to see the consequences of actions. It's a meager skill, perhaps, compared to the talents that the ancestor has placed in you girls, but it has served me well until this night. But you should know, the greatest joy to those who see the future is that life remains full of surprises, and you have all surprised me. I had a son once. I couldn't have loved him more. But I never had a daughter. I would have been proud to call any of you my own. You are my children, children of the ancestor, daughters of the rock of faith, daughters of sweet mercy. I expect you to meet your enemy with ferocity and make a good account of yourselves. She's so good. I love her so much. I'm so glad she's okay. I was really worried that this book was going to end with her death. I'll tell you what. I really thought. So they all basically stand in a line and they're like ready. And all of a sudden Nona says something's coming. And Ara's like, yeah. And I was like cracking up at this point. And she's like, no, not that. There's a noise. Do you guys hear? And she says, it's a shh. And then there's basically a landslide. I don't know what the word was she was going to say, but landslide is the word. Like half the mountainside just comes down and takes all of those dudes out. It's amazing. And everyone's staring like, how did that happen? And she looks over and she sees Zole. So the abbess asks how. Nona says she has the ship heart. Kettle shook her head. It can't be. Scherzel's vault was too... Zole held the sphere up, its light somehow both fierce to look upon, yet too faint to illuminate the road past glimmers here and there. It is the Neuguin's ship heart. How could... Abbess Glass started. Zole bowed her head and raised the sphere higher. In the action, Nona saw it, just a glimpse, a stain, dark and purple, flowing from the hand that held the heart down across the wrist, quickly lost beneath the sleeves of Zole's habit. Abbess Glass gathered herself. How is this possible? Zole raised her face to them, her eyes burning with the ship heart's light. I am the chosen one. I mean, it seems like you are. I don't know, sweetie. And I think that Nona's the only one who saw that, but I'm not positive. The abbess might have seen. I don't know. I feel like if there's nothing to indicate to me that Nona is the only one with eyes that good. But because she's the only one of them that we know of who has actually been possessed, she might be the only one who knew to look for that. You know? But that's not true. Because Kettle's there, and Kettle knows to look for that. She's aware of what she's the one who warns Nona not to do it. So, sorry, Martin commented. Let's see. It might be Nona is the only one who would realize what the bruise might mean. They were just in a massive fight after all. And then he says, what? But like she is told by Kettle that those things like that touching it causes these, right? So wouldn't Kettle know what it meant also? I don't know. Maybe she doesn't know what they look like, though. It might be that she knows that, like, it will cause, like, the creation of a demon or something, but she doesn't realize how that manifests and what it looks like. Martin commented and said almost the exact same thing. Kettle might not know how the devil actually physically manifests. Yeah, okay. All right. I'm willing to accept that one. That makes sense. So then we go to the epilogue with fucking Lano. And he had brought 2 armies, a Palarthi army that had now been spent, and an army of his own house that had yet to test its strength against the sisters who barred the way. Can we just really appreciate the Palarthi army that had now been spent? I just love it so much, guys. I love so much that they've already taken care of one of them. And then he's got this other crew, and I'm just like, I'm not real confident in them either. And then it says that there are 8 Noi Gwyn, and that they are meant to be like the most deadly than all of the rest of the army, and that one of them is meant to be more deadly than the other 7 put together. It says the singular of the Noi Gwyn was said only to leave the Tetragode when the Tetragode itself was torn down and reconstructed in some new stronghold hidden from the world. The singular, and that's with a capital S, that's a title, would move from the old Tetragode to the new and resume his place as the dark heart of the organization. The singular was keeper of the Book of Shadows, linked by shadow bond to every lightless and every Noi Gwyn, the spider at the center of the web. And yet here he was at Lano's right hand in the light of day, and yet so deep in darkness that he seemed a silhouette. I love that so much. So Lano says, lead the troops in, take her down. Crippled would be best, but dead if you must. Kill everyone else, the nuns first, then the children. He wanted vengeance on Sister Cage, of course, but dead was dead. Reaching for more than that had been the downfall of his older brother and his father. Nona Gray had given him his lordship. So, wait, I'm just realizing. Does that mean his dad did die? I didn't even think of that. I didn't really, realize the significance of him saying that. Because that sounds like he's like, oh, well, she killed my dad, which was really doing me a favor, so that's nice. I think that's... Okay, so maybe his dad did die. Oh, I feel better. That's nice. Yay! Dead Thuran! Oh, good. What a nice discovery to have at the very end of the episode. Hurrah. So they head forward. I didn't even think about it because, earlier I said that he must not know what she did because he's out here and there hasn't been time. But I didn't really think about, how much of a time jump this has to be if they're back at the Abbey. And he didn't just head out immediately with this fire blazing and go straight to Sweet Mercy. That was the amount of time it took to get the Abbess there from Sweet Mercy, although they did do a very meandering trip. But okay, this is when Clara turns up, and he really wants to smack her across the face because she's acting very familiar, very confident of the fact that she can just step in the middle of this absolute shit show this is about to be and just talk to him like a fucking equal. And she says she'll run. Now she has her friend, she'll run. She's terrified of falling into the Tacsis hands again. Or Noi Gwyn's hands. She'll make for the caves, and you'll never find her. Not unless you know them like I do. And Lano's just like, my troops will find them. And she's like, no. And it says, the singular started towards the distant pillars. The Noi Gwyn began to follow in his wake, the girl with them. Come. Lano made no move to go, but a Noi Gwyn to either side took his elbows and started him forward. Lano glanced helplessly at his soldiers. He had never intended to lead this charge. The singular accelerated across the plateau. Let her die on a Noigwin blade. Let this be certain. Let there be no escape for her. Which makes sense, because she escaped the Noigwin's attempts to kill her more than once. This is a personal affront. This is their reputation now, you know? And Lano says, escape? Lano intended to bark his laugh, but it came out nervous. She won't run. Not from here. It's her home. Her family. Besides, he gestured to the smoking horizon. Where would she run? The whole world is on fire. And that's the end of the book. And, I mean, she just told you? Like, she just told you the caves. Why are you asking where she'd run to? When that's the whole reason that she came to tell you is the caves, which would not be on fire because you didn't know about them. Like, it's a weird, he's so dense. It's not like I'm mad at the author here. It feels like true to the character, like he's just not hearing her. But, like, what just happened? Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Martin says, do you have any idea of what leads to the events of this prose/epilogue? None. Like, all I keep thinking is that it still has to do with getting revenge on her, because he's, like, giving orders specifically relating to her. And he says about how, like, his father and his brother were trying to do too much rather than just kill her. So, although, yeah, no, that is what he said. The whole world is on fire. What about that? Yeah, see, I don't know. Is that, like, because I had assumed that was him burning the whole surrounding area. But now I'm like, well, maybe something happened. And what immediately comes to mind is something with, like, the moon, because it's melting the ice. Maybe something went wrong with that and it, like, has started some fires. I don't know. This was less than 50 pages, and I was really worried about, like, whether it was too little, but I really made more than an hour out of that, no problem. There's a lot to talk about. Ugh. But yeah, I don't have any theories on that, Martin. I'm very excited to start the next book, though. What's the next book called? We got Red Sister, Gray Sister, Holy Sister. Thank you. I remember you told me that now. Ooh, I'm excited to start that one. All right. Cool. Well, thank you guys all so much for listening. I hope that you're enjoying it. Thank you again to Martin for commissioning. And I will be seeing you all again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.